Good afternoon to all the participants. I welcome all participants, our students, experts for this day 4 session first of IoT for Agriculture Application Faculty Development Program, which is sponsored by AICT Atal Academy. Today we have a renowned person from TIFR. He is joining us to deliver his talk on sensors and low power instrumentation for agriculture IoT application. Uh, the renowned person today is Dr. B. Satyanarayana. He, he did his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from JNT University, Hyderabad, and PhD in Physics from IIT Bombay. He is working in the Department of High Energy Physics TIFR since 1983 and is currently a Scientific Officer H in TIFR. He is also a visiting professor at Applied Science Department of American College, Madurai. His area of interest includes detectors and instrumentation for high energy and nuclear physics experiments. Dr. Satyanarayana has published about 250 research papers in proceedings in national and international journals and conferences, besides scores of invited talks. His very first paper won the Best Paper Award by Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering. Dr. Satyanarayana is a fellow of Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering as well as Institute of Engineers. He is a member of Governing Council of Instrument Society of India as well as a member of Indian Physics Association. He guided a large number of doctoral, master and undergraduate students. He served on many of doctoral and expert committees as well as academic councils, board of studies and advisory boards on universities. He is one of the editorial and referring teams of several prestigious science and engineering journals. Dr. Satyanarayana is one of the active member of IEEE and serving as a senior member of IEEE. He is currently an committee member and vice chair of IEEE Bombay section, as well as the chair of its Signal Processing Society. He is previously served as a secretary of section as well as chair of its technical and professional activities. He is also served as executive committee member as well as vice chair technical activities of IEEE India Council. He won IEEE Bombay section's Outstanding Volunteer Award for 2014 and IEEE Headquarters MGA Achievement Award for 2016. He is very famous in students and teacher in most of the engineering colleges for his talks. So today I would like to hear he again with his words of wisdom on sensors. So I request Dr. Satyanarayana sir for this to deliver his talk for this FDP. I request sir to start with his session. Sir, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Praveen Wankade. It's a great opportunity for me to share some of my ideas on the topic that we chose today. Namely, this is on the sensors and low power instrumentation in particular for the applications involving IoT for specifically for agricultural sector. I hope you can see my slides and also my audio and video are clear, right?
Yes, sir. Everything is clear, sir.
Okay. Okay. So once again, thank you, and thanks all of you who have joined this particular lecture. As Praveen said, of course, I work mostly instrumentation that is connected with science in general. And in science, we have a field called high energy physics. I'm not going to bore today on any of those aspects, but I just wanted to kind of make clear that I'm actually trying to kind of connect up these two fields in terms of instrumentation, and more specifically the the sensors and instrumentation for a specific theme of this FDP program, namely the agriculture. What you see on the screen at the moment is a kind of a representative picture where you have let us say this is all, of course, is a nice field, a crop, but trying to kind of gather a large type of informations by using varieties of sensors, let us say, and then you can actually see from the arrows that are kind of shown, and everything is actually trying to reach to a common repository, namely these days we all call that as a cloud. And from there you have a device maybe at your backend where you are able to kind of run through certain algorithms that is supposed to compute based on the parameters which are given to you by a large number of sensors and spread over often many maybe square kilometers in some sense. But the most important aspect, as I also said, besides the sensors that they collect varieties of data, how well you are able to assimilate this data, namely look at the data, compute the parameters, and then you will also obviously have an output which will say how you must take action in terms of, let us say, putting on certain actuator or providing certain conditions for the crops. Ultimately, the idea, of course, is to see that for the given investment, you would like to obviously get the best yield. So that is the whole game of using technology. Namely, in this case, it is IoT technology, which is primarily used in this context for agriculture. Okay, I know you are all experts. I'm sure you know many things that initially I'm going to kind of say, but nevertheless, I usually try to kind of go a little, systematically in the terms of trying to kind of bring out some very elementary stuff and then, build the topic as we go along. We actually, of course, know the transducers quite often is a textbook definition of converting, since you are all faculties, converting a certain form of energy into another form. We of course have many types of energies that we see outside in the environment. It could be mechanical or electromagnetic or chemical or whatever, acoustic or sound, thermal, whatever. But we usually like them to convert into electrical signals because it's more easy to kind of process them. Now, since we are going to talk not about transducers but more of sensors, the rest of the talk, we must of course know that sensors are also transducers in a way. The only difference is that we don't need to really convert a complete for transformation of energy from one to another to a level of maintaining the uniformity or maximum efficiency. But a sensor is usually just only to sense, to only detect a particular parameter or some characteristics of what we are talking about in the environment. For example, if there is some change in the environment for which we are looking at, and we want to detect it, and also we want to kind of quantify what the corresponding output that we are going to receive. And again, just like transducer, sensors are also, of course, we would like them to provide electrical output so that it is easy for us to kind of process them. So just in other words, one must think of sensors are a kind of special variety in terms of design or operation of the transducers. So once again, we all know, we are all kind of surrounded, we are all like been swamped in some sense by a large varieties of sensors everywhere. I mean, what I try to kind of show here is a kind of representative picture of what varieties of sensors that we have. Of course, temperature is probably the first sensors we all worked with maybe while we are in school or college, which is very important for many measurement and control and sometimes compensation. Like when you want to put on an AC, we want to read the temperature and adjust let us say the cooling power and so on and so forth. Vibration and force torque, there again next major applications where you want to measure the vibration or gravity or velocity of angular, angles, force, and so on and so forth. And this is again used in aeronautics. It is used in many other applications. Humidity plays a big role, not only for our comfort at home and in the office, but in the context of agriculture, IoT, we will see that humidity measurements in terms of what is there in the field outside and also in the soil makes a big difference to the crop, metrics. Piezo is something which is quite typically used in medical applications because it converts certain vibrations into electrical signal, or because, for example, what is shown here is the stethoscope, which is used to measure, let us say, our heartbeats and so on. Fluid is a vast field for sensors. They measure either real-time monitoring of various fluids. Fluids could be a huge amount of fluid going through slicing the gates of a dam, or it could be fluid flowing through our veins inside our body, like blood. So, I mean, all these applications are completely covered under that. These days, one finds a large kind of application of varieties of sensors used in automobile industry. Some of them you will actually see in the talk, in the slide that is coming up, but this is a big commercial venture, area where sensors are used very, very much. And positions of all type, varieties of basic physics that was used to convert the position into an electrical signal. Variety. In fact, if you go by concepts of converting primary energy into electrical signal, and what all physics is used in a particular sensor, you will find the position sensors are the ones which use varieties of physics principles to convert, let us say, energy into electrical signal. We'll see some of them again. Similarly, the optics have now become very, very top rated sensors because, for example, what is shown here, you can actually see somebody is trying to measure it is like an oximeter, oxygen levels in the blood, which of course you will hear these days every day practically. And there also, other than medical, there are varieties of applications. Pressure is another device, other sensor which are used both in the avionics, robotics, drones, and other varieties of applications. This is just a feel for what is length and breadth of the world of sensors that we are already familiar. Many of them, of course, we do use in our day-to-day life. But this is a broad category. And classically, if you really think about, there are a couple of industries, a couple of fields that we know where the maximum number of sensors are used. One of them, robotics. If you see on the screen, dozens of varieties of sensors. They're all very classical sensors, whether it's an accelerometer or gyro or, tilt resistors, metal detectors, UV detector. I mean, I'm not going to kind of read through all this, but every one of these sensors and actuators are used in any reasonably robotic application. So they're all very classical because they are all based on certain principles we know of what we study. At the same time, all of us must have used them in some time or the other. The other industry, which I think has been now using sensors much, much larger scale than, let us say, 20, 30 years ago, is the automotive industry. And particularly now with advanced driver assistance systems or autonomous vehicles coming up on the field very, very, very openly, you will actually find that the cars that we buy nowadays, actually maybe about 1/3 of the cost of these cars is filled with electronics, sensors and actuators rather than the automobile component. What is actually shown here are the number of sensors or devices that are used in every part of the car. I'm actually not going to read each one of these because you could actually see that from the screen. And some of the sensors are, of course, used for a pure automobile application from the point of view, let us say, getting the fuel efficiency, getting maybe pollution levels and so on and so forth. I mean, these are specifically connected with the automobile, the device or the instrument itself, or the car itself. But there are also many sensors which are used for our comfort, sensors used for protection or safety, maybe sensors used for our entertainment, and And also, ease of driving many times. Nowadays, compared to olden days, you do find, for example, here it says active park assist. You talk about tire pressure sensor. You talk about front object laser radar, to be able to kind of either see from the front or the back how easily you can park in very, very congested areas. I mean, the point is not really say, things like collision sensors and so on and so forth. My point I'm trying to say is that uh, the main industry, whatever, it doesn't matter whether it is robotics, automobile, industrial, scientific, or agriculture, which you are going to talk obviously more today, they all been now benefited from the technologies that are now becoming more available in terms of, let us say, amalgamation of sensors with the IoT or software or IT technologies. So I'm trying to kind of build a motivation why sensors have come to the center stage of all the instrumentation that we kind of see today. But I also want to run through very quickly, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and try to kind of also say that since I said these sensors are more of a classical sensors, I want to also give a feel for you that what are the kind of sensors that now becoming increasingly useful, and they were not so classical in the sense, even though they are based on classical physics principle. One such detector, one such sensors, if you call, is what is called optical fiber strain gauge, where if you want to kind of monitor the strength of, let us say, a building, a tall building or a tower or something, you actually stick optical fiber all along on the building, which anyway you'll run an optical fiber because you want to get data into it, TV signals into it, and so on. But on the same fiber, if you actually use so-called the grated fiber is, instead of plain fiber, you actually have, you can see these little grates that you see in the core of the fiber with a particular refractive index. And if I actually send a signal, if I can send this input which is transmitted through that, and depending on whether the grate is intact or whether the fiber is experiencing certain strain because maybe the building is kind of tilting in one side and so on and so forth, you actually get a different kind of signal through, and which you will be able to detect very, very accurately. And that's very important to kind of monitor this, for example, big towers, or sometimes nowadays, like wind mills, which are very tall and very big. Quite often you need to kind of monitor their stability and so on. Another sensor which finds extensive use in the medical field, may not be so much into agriculture area, is what is called magnetic field measurement. All your MRI and all these machines that typically do body imaging actually use this sensor, which is a semiconductor device. Its semiconductor usually has, let us say, two junctions, basically saying a P and N and so on. And then if I apply a certain potential between them and to the magnetic field that is passing through a patient in an MRI machine and so on and so forth, based on the strength of the magnetic field, which is written as B here, and it will actually induce certain voltage across the two plates which are perpendicular to the place where you applied a bias voltage. So this VDC is a bias voltage, and the signal that is produced because of the magnetic field strength is what is called VH. VH stands for Hall sensors. Okay, and this it has become a mainstay in medical field because all the medical diagnostic tools requires the Hall sensors to be used. I don't have to tell much today about the gaseous and electrochemical sensors, because these are the ones which are now used to measure very, very high sensitivity, with very, very high sensitivity, to measure the, let us say, the gaseous concentrations and temperatures within the environment, because now we are all concerned about the to measure the concentrations in the environment, because we are worried about the environmental pollutions and the kind of ill effects that we are actually going to see the greenhouse gases, the concentration of pollutants in the atmosphere, the global warming and the climatic change and so on and so forth. You find a wide varieties of sensors to measure so many types of gases that are listed here. And what is most important is that these sensors are extremely sensitive to even parts per million, some of them even parts per billion kind of sensors. And some of them you'll also find in the agricultural area where you need to measure the similar concentrations using infrared sensors, and their concentrations either in the soil or on the plant bodies or even in the fields ambience that are around. They're very important to measure to get the health of crops. So these are the exactly the same sensors. Of course, we are all worried about our water bodies as well, because water constitutes large amount of our planet. And specific sensors are also now becoming popular, which are like used for certain types of hydrocarbons. So namely, what happens is the bacteria or algae or any antibodies that reside in the water bodies, they respond to the toxins in the water that they see. For example, certain plastic that is thrown in water or other toxins that are thrown in the water. These algae or antibodies or bacteria, they respond to these toxins by emitting certain light. That light is something which you want to detect using these very tiny sensors, which are obviously placed in the water bodies, and then you can monitor, how clean a sea is, a river is, a water body, maybe your swimming pool in your house or somewhere. These are the sensors which is becoming very important to monitor the atmosphere in the pollution. You'll be again surprised. For example, nowadays you do find, for example, uh, the cognitive or neuromotor kind of development disabilities. You heard yesterday, day before yesterday, there was a Nobel Prize that was announced for so-called dark matter, a black hole. And of course, the person who actually really theoretized that is Stephen Hawking, right? And of course, he did not get because he passed away, but he had this problem. And now people say that if it is diagnosed very early in child, who are born prematurely and so on, and then one could prevent such problems, and one can kind of address it. So people now are making so-called biocompatible sensors, because they are made of biocompatible materials like glycerin and potassium iodide. And if this kind of sensors, if you paste on the child's on the hand or fist, and depending on what is the motion of the fingers or the hand, and also the force of the grip, you will be able to kind of monitor and see whether the child is growing normally or there is some problem connected with this. This is called neuromotors, right? So one went up to even point of saying that, can I actually monitor the food that I'm going to eat as the food is transferred from one place to another place? Typically they are all shipped on containers. For example, fish is one of them, which gets spoiled very soon, or fish or meat or something like that. And now the sensors which are coming with so-called edible sensors, which are actually made of corn or potato starch based polymers or magnesium silicon dioxide or nitride, all these are very easily digestible for humans, and it's completely biodegradable and safe. So by placing these sensors in the food, I mean, I could even insert in a fish body, and you keep monitoring as the vehicle go on from city to city, monitor the temperatures and other conditions very well, and then able to kind of see that what is the quality of this fish that I'm eating, or other food items. So one has gone to that kind of a level of maintaining the kind of the technologies basically are growing into that kind of a arena today. I mentioned briefly sometime back about the medical field. Gone are those days where you go to a diagnostic lab and they take an X-ray, which is essentially an X-ray is a kind of black and white or a grayscale or a film in which you will only be noticing whether there is a airline fracture of a bone, or there is a flesh or bone, right? That's all we know. But now we have silicon sensors which are able to kind of see using the same X-ray gun, you could actually get, this is your silicon sensor, and the image is not like on a film, but it is actually goes through a matrix, a pixel by, array of pixels, which are just about 50 microns in size, about 256 by 256 rows and columns, and the signal that is produced is immediately kind of processed just beneath this this chip. Okay, you can see those dots that you can see them on the picture, and then after you process, you will be able to kind of transfer this data very well. Now you will see a fantastic resolution of this picture, so much so it's not only just one X-ray energy, but actually you will see many energy levels. So when you compound those pictures, you can actually see a color X-ray, and with the highest resolution that you can think of. The picture not just gives you where the bone is, where the flesh is, but it can even give you, a complete image of all the elements on your body, layer by layer by layer. So it's an ultimate in the imaging sensors, which are the backbones of agricultural IoT. Right? Imaging sensors have taken a front seat because most of the time when you talk about mapping a big field in agriculture, it's one of the things is, apart from thermal, is the imaging, as we will see, and the sensors developments here is making a big role there. And it's not just silicon that I talked about. There is also brand new material called perovskite, which has actually just come on the horizon, which is also used just like what I told you about silicon. It's also an X-ray detector, but exceedingly good, because unlike silicon, where you require to apply certain voltage, whereas this perovskite imaging sensors do not require any outside power source. They just convert. So these are the thin films that I kind of usually kind of apply on any surface, which will convert X-ray photons into electrical signals. So these are again a brand new technology that came about in the field of sensors, which are going to have far-reaching applications, not only in the other fields, the medical or industrial or whatever, but more importantly in the agricultural field. Okay. Optical sensors, I talked to you some time back, which also play a big role in terms of what you call phenotyping, which you will see soon. But of course, as we know, we are passing through these troubled times of COVID-19. Why I suddenly brought that up today is to say optical sensors, which are used in the plant management, are going to be kind of already been used in a big way to, in the for example, real-time PCR or antibody testing or X-ray and CT imaging, digital pathology, and many such applications. And this is what I was telling, like a genotyping. Genotyping is something to look at how the growth of certain features, certain traits that happen based on genome. So, I mean, whether you call CT, whether you call X-ray, whether you call antibody, this is all actually looking at the picture that is coming out of, let us say, red blood cells or some other body traits. So optical sensors are making a big role. Why I showed this particular transparency is to show companies which is to make, like this is a Japanese company, which is to make wide varieties of those sensors for science and industrial applications. Now you will find that they suddenly started making very low cost, devices for medical applications, and particularly in the COVID related situation. As I just now mentioned, we talked about blood oxygen sensors, and you will find now watches coming from Apple or Fitbit or Samsung or whatever these companies with the wrist watches, where I actually basically mount these LEDs, what you see in this picture here, in the wrist, and then I will be able to kind of send lights of different color through this through this watch, and then it can actually determine the way the red blood cells which are in the body, they're absorbing light. Oxygenated good blood cells are supposed to absorb more infrared light compared to red light, whereas the cells that are somewhat not healthy, but that means it is in a patient body, are supposed to be in the other way around. And the signal that you get back from the red blood cells, you can actually run little algorithms inside that little watch that you are wearing, and whether you know, without your notice, your blood can be monitored for example, for the oxygen levels. So these are the kind of technology where suddenly the technologies find a new direction and new opportunities, because of course COVID is it's a great thing. We can call that as an opportunity, but it was indeed, to be very frank, an opportunity for sensors to go beyond the traditional developments that we can kind of think of. Now, in the context of IoT, when you come from sensors to IoT, of course, you all know that we are so-called passing through industrial revolutions, and then we are so-called at Industry 4.0, which is essentially talking only about Internet of Things, unlike the mechanization or mass production or computer and automation, which ruled the first three industrial revolutions, right? Okay, so we know, I mean, we are actually talking about those things, Internet of Things, which are embedded along with the sensors in the first place, the software at the back, and also many other technologies. All that we do it and embedded in that little device because we want to connect up or exchange data from the physical world into the devices or systems which are on the back, and usually they are on the internet, right? Because that is what you saw in the very first slide. Now, for the purpose of IoT, they function, as I said, various kinds of intelligences, right? And essentially they serve to, I mean, I would like to kind of collect data, push it and share along with the whole network of connected devices. Please remember, connected devices is the key of the IoT. Now, when I collect from the data from the field, which is collected by large number of sensors, and that will allow the devices to autonomously function, right? The whole ecosystem then becomes smarter. So I'm collecting the data. For example, let me give an example. Suppose take Tesla vehicles. Okay. Now all the sensors which are mounted on a car, they're recording the data, their perception about their surroundings. And even if I drive one Tesla car, of course, my car is filled with so many sensors. It collects the data and sends it to the massive database, right? You might say, okay, it is my data and I am actually using it for driving my car, right? No, that's not all. This data then, which is compiled from hundreds and thousands of such cars on the road, it's all processed, you know, with all this information. But the important thing is that information which is actually computed is downloaded back into all the vehicles on the road. So it is actually getting back to say that how intelligent my car becomes on the car on fly, because it is not the data that, you know, so-called closed loop data where I collect data and I apply to my car and so on. No, it is actually a global network of connected devices, because of which you know, every car becomes a very, very smart vehicle. All Tesla cars become day by day they become smarter because essentially they are collecting more and more data, right? That is how we know it works. So again, since I'm going to particularly talk about sensors for industrial applications here, I don't want to go into detail too much, but the same thing that I kind of mentioned, the temperature, the proximity sensors, okay, that means which are, you know, for example, inductive sensors. I'm not actually making a contact, but I'm at the vicinity, which I can have a capacitive coupling or a photoelectric or ultrasound or sometimes magnetic. Pressure sensors, water quality sensors is what we are going to talk more and more. Chemical sensors, gas sensors, we heard about it. Smoke and IR sensors, which are more for strategic and, you know, wartime applications, as well as for you know, level sensors, imaging sensors, motion detector, and optical we already talked about. Why I gave this list of sensors without going into much detail is the varieties of sensors that we have seen in first or second slide are the fields in which traditionally these sensors have been kind of developed. So if my application was imaging sensors, so I actually started looking at only those. I said, okay, charge coupled devices, CMOS semiconductor devices, and in things like that. So this particular sensor development was specific to a field in which I expected this to kind of grow. Similarly, accelerometers, when it is more for, let us say, aviation industry, robotic industry, or maybe you know, entertainment industry, and so on. And similarly optics, similarly humidity and so on, right? But what had happened last 15, 20 years is there has been a big interdisciplinary approach in terms of using the sensors into other cross fields, and therefore those requirements have been plowed back into development. And that is how you see now more and more sensors, as I mentioned in the very beginning, they're becoming rich in terms of features, and they're becoming rich in terms of sensitivity, just because the application space of these sensors have gone much, much broader. Now, the beauty of these IoT field is not just only using the sensor devices, which of course, as I said, it's growing up very fast, but how am I going to convert, how am I going to connect these sensors? Am I going to take each sensor, connect a wire, connect to my computer, connect to a small microcontroller, or is that way? Or can I actually connect all of them in a wireless network? Okay, which means I connect a large number of nodes which are deployed in the field. It can be for measuring earthquakes, it can be measuring tsunamis, it can be measuring plant parameters, it can be measuring field parameters, but I would like to have hundreds of them, thousands of them in the field, and then they will be collecting data. That's fine, but most importantly, they should be able to organize themselves into a network. Okay, something what we call self-organizing. You don't set up an IP number, power and so on and so forth. When I throw these sensors literally on the ground from maybe a low-flying aircraft, I should be able to see these sensors get connected and ultimately passing through a particular, maybe a gateway, and push that data, as we saw in the first slide, on the internet, where I'll be able to kind of look at all the data sitting somewhere else and take an action based on the data that is collected from a widespread geographically distributed things. So the key to one next gear as far as the IoT is concerned is not only development of sensors, but the way I connect them, the way I make them into what you call connected network, connected devices, right? And more importantly, the wireless devices. But the moment they become wireless, and suddenly you started finding, as I was trying to allude it to, a completely new set of applications that came about, irrespective of whether they were traditionally IoT based applications or not. But today you see transportation, you see smart buildings, you see industrial, you see entertainment, surveillance, health sector, environmental monitoring, agriculture. This is what we are going to talk a little bit more today, right? Smart grids and so on. That is because it's not that the sensors have taken a new leap. It is because the way you connect them together. So it's a networking technologies, wireless technologies, and the speeds at which you have these opportunities. That has actually completely changed and brought today what we really look at as Internet of Things. And it is, of course, at the lifeblood of IoT stands the sensors, but sensors, as you will see, the way I am actually going to connect them together plays a big role. Then, of course, the data that I collect from each of those thousands of geographically distributed sensors, and how well I'm able to kind of transport the data, how quickly I can transport this data, you will see that. But remember always, your hardware resources available on the sensor are always limited, because each of your sensors is not a CPU box, right? You can't have 200 watts power and let us say a big size of a CPU box. It is a tiny device, maybe 2 millimeter by 2 millimeter device, in which all this functioning, very high efficient transportation, communication mechanism, data, a little bit data analytics that is going to sit in this sensor should also be low weight algorithms. And then the value, then only when I get the value of this data, I'll be able to kind of define the action that I can put. Of course, ultimately, the beneficiaries are the people, and that is what today we generally talk about. When you talk about IEEE, we always talk about advancing technology for humanity. Now, as I mentioned here, one of the basic building block, just like another main parameter that has actually driven the developments in the IoT is the communication. Okay, and thanks to parallel developments that were happening of the communication technologies all the way starting from so-called first 1G in 1980s, all the way today we are talking about the 5G devices, and a wide spectrum of network devices are able to transfer very quickly, and that is because of the communication technology today we have, and we are able to transfer very large chunks of data at phenomenally high speeds, and that has actually brought so-called low latency. What is low latency? That I have my sensor sitting in the field, how fast I'm able to communicate and transfer my data to the central server, thousands of such sensors. Only then I'll be able to compute what what the action to be taken. So from the data collection to the data from the action, that is what is called a latency, the time that it took between the data acquisition or data collection to the action taken. Obviously, that depends on how well I'm able to compute, but I transfer data, I'm able to compute the data. Now, I mean, of course, this will continue to expand because IoTs have become a much bigger enterprise. And there are also areas which has dramatically changed the IoT the way we are seeing. One of the big thing is really is we are not just collecting data from one type, one type of data or one type of sensor, but we are actually collecting a large number of data coming from various devices. Okay, so it is not like we are only monitoring temperature, we are only monitoring pressure, and so on and so forth, but we are actually collecting varieties of data from a single domain. For example, when you are collecting data from a field, we are not just collecting just temperature or pressure or whatever. You are collecting a varieties of data altogether. Then only you'll be able to take a decision. And as I just now mentioned, you would like to gather this data very fast so that you'll be able to take a faster decisions, right? But that's what I told the 5G. And most important of these two factors, I also want to tell you that these devices today, that is a topic of a talk as well, is these devices must consume the lowest power that is possible, because they're sitting in the field. You can't afford them to consume a lot of power, right? Very low current consumption. And most importantly, also, they should be small in size. Then only you will be able to integrate your applications. What are the numbers that I've shown here is what is the fraction of the application that affects this particular feature or this particular trait of IoT, right? Of the sensors. Okay, so, and of course, the main requirements, as I said today, the hardware that you build should be able to work in the fields. It should not happen that they work only at room temperatures or maybe very air-conditioned temperatures. When I throw in the field, the temperatures are going to vary quite a lot, or they will be very rugged. They should be rugged in the field. They should, of course, the measuring accuracy has to be obviously very good. Otherwise, the device will be useless. The sensor must have some intelligence which is marked in the sensor itself. It should not happen that every data is collected and it is just sent backwards, because then the communication becomes a bottleneck. I should be able to also acquire data very fast, and ultimately I'm actually going to put this again on the cloud. Once again, these numbers that you see here, they are actually saying how important this particular factor is for the IoT devices. You can actually see things like endurance, measurement accuracy, and the sensor intelligence play a big role in terms of key requirements for IoT. And today, most of the challenges which still need to be kind of acquired in terms of IoT for sensors is, I should be able to get a right hardware and proper connectivity, and then security of data for IoT devices becomes important. The software that runs on the device, I told you, there should be very low weight algorithms. I cannot use, thousands of lines of code consuming huge power and so on and so forth, right? So these are the main markers. These are the main markers and main challenges specifically for IoT applications in the agriculture, right? That are challenges, but what are the opportunities that we have today? IoT particularly, we know it has completely disrupted many industries we are all familiar with. Industries, process industry, for example, we know very well, which has actually completely changed scenario. Household, our lives, our comfort has completely changed. and of course all other industry, you name aviation, you name transport, you name any of those industries, medicine and so on. But agriculture is also something which cannot be an exception to it, because agriculture of course is the main occupation for large fraction of people in India particularly, but also elsewhere. After all, these are the guys who are actually making food for us, literally. Now you will find when you talk about IoT, IoT is a connected, devices. So you can also call them as IoT as a connected agricultural market. It was, of the order of a couple of billion until recently. But what is actually expected now within next couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, it is expected to grow almost double at a growth of about 20%. Now, what is most surprising is this 20% increase is almost seen directly in touch, in sync with the IoT devices installation. So which tend to give a feeling that actually this big jump of agricultural throughput in some sense on a big scale is also somewhat tightly connected to deployment of IoT devices in the field of agriculture. Okay, and that's again, I think it is very, very important to kind of know that even, like for example, about 5-6 years back, if you really talk about the devices that are connected, are the order of about 10 to 15 million, and now it is expected almost 20-30 times larger compared to that in just about 10 years. So that is the phenomenal kind of compound annual growth rate that IoT devices are seeing in this particular sector of agriculture. Okay, here I want to kind of go just one by one, the mainstays of the agricultural sensors, the location sensors. Okay, location, you want to measure, something like a GPS, right? So you want to find out the location of those devices is to determine, where is my latitude, where is my longitude, where is my altitude, and I would like to have within a feet, because that is how I can map the entire field. So this precise positioning is very important, because we talk about precision agriculture. So when you say I want to kind of map my field, which is 1 hectare area, I should be able to see these parameters, measure these parameters locally. It's not you say for my entire 1 hectare field, it is just one parameter. Anyway, it is not possible, because the crop never grows uniformly throughout. The temperature conditions, the pressure conditions, temperature, soil conditions, they're not same within that one piece of land. So you must be able to kind of say at least 1 square feet by 1 square, 1 feet by 1 feet. Okay, so for example, GPS devices are the most commonly used. I mentioned to you optical sensors a lot during already my talk, but this is the most important thing, to see the soil parameters. Okay, now the actual optical sensors measure at different frequency of light. Okay, and what is the reflected light or infrared or mid infrared or whatever coming reflected from the soil. Okay, now if I place those sensors on a vehicle or maybe a drone or aerial platform, and or even maybe satellite, now the soil reflectance is what is the light that is coming out the soil, or for example, sometimes the plant, that will give you a clear idea about what is the soil quality that I have. For example, is it determine what is the clay, the organic matter that exists, the moisture content of the soil. All of these important parameters can be done rather non-invasively, not only non-invasively, but also at certain distance. I'll be able to send a radiation, either infrared or whatever, and the light that gets reflected, the infrared that gets reflected, by looking at the so-called reflectance. What is the amount of light or radiation that gets reflected? From there, I'll be able to kind of give you very nice map of the soil or the plant. Electrochemical sensors, electrochemical, which means it is electrical output based on the chemical parameters that we are talking about. One of the big important factor that is most important in this is pH, and also what are the nutrients that I have in my soil, right? They kind of detect for a specific ions that I have in the soil, right? So sensors which are basically, mounted in some kind of sledges or whatever, that you can used to map the pH and soil parameters, nutrient levels. That is because it is working on the chemical characteristics of the soil. Sometimes, though I said many times you don't require to make an invasive kind of measurement, but sometimes you can also use mechanical sensors, which are actually required to, to see how loose or how solid my soil, the plant soil is, because if I can penetrate, if the sensor can penetrate the soil and record what is the resistance that the soil is offering to me, right? That means there will be some strain gauge and so on and so forth, right? So that will give an idea about the quality of the soil that I kind of have. So people use what you call tension meters and so on, which will detect what is the force used by the roots for a water absorption. So it's important because ultimately the roots are the ones which are actually absorbing the water, and that is very useful for what is called irrigation intervention. What do you mean by irrigation intervention? That, when should I water my plant, my crop, and so on. It also depends to a large extent. Okay, that depends on what is the force that the roots are using to kind of absorb the water. Now that is a parameter to do very precision kind of agriculture. Sometimes you need to kind of poke into various fields, various locations in the fields to find out the quality of this particular mechanical quality. And sometimes, dielectric constant is basically an electrical property which will change depending on the amount of moisture in the present. So it's like a capacitor, and then the material that is between the two plates is actually my soil, and based on what is the soil that I have, the capacitance, the dielectric constant, and then therefore the capacitance of this sensor changes. And that is a very, very sensitive probe for this. And similarly, airflow sensors use permeability, how loose my soil is, and how it is able to kind of grow certain crop very well and things like that. These are actually made using, I pump certain pressure, push some air with a certain pressure and see how well the ground is able to take that prescribed, prescribed pressure and so on. So many kind of soil properties, which is compactification. We say compaction is how hard it is, or the structure, the soil type, the moisture level. All this can be monitored very, very well by this sensors. And at the end, I say it's not just one sensor, but it is agricultural stations which I kind of erect around my plot, around my crop field, and those stations they use varieties of sensors, not one sensor, but they use varieties of sensors which are appropriate for that particular crop, and they'll send all the air temperature, soil temperature, the rainfall, the depth and leaf wetness, chlorophyll, wind speed, you name any number, all those parameters are going to be sent together to the backend. Okay, so now if you are aiming something for specifically precision farming, so it kind of basically you say that I'm able to monitor very precisely and also control the parameters that I need to control the fields by looking at this data. And not only fields, but sometimes I also look at the monitoring livestock, for example, which I come to, or vehicle tracking or field observation and so on and so forth. So the main goal of precision farming is to analyze this data very carefully, which is generated by various sensors, and I should be able to react accordingly. What do you mean by react? React means I should be able to kind of, do irrigation and other methods carefully based on a particular data that I have. In this field, I use IT, of course, sensors, robotics, autonomous vehicles. As I told you, many of these sensors have become mainstay in this precision agriculture or precision farming. And one of the main things for that, of course, if I want to do any precision farming here, how well I'm able to log this data that you see, the climate, which is playing a big role. So I should be able to collect all the environmental data that is coming from various fields. So the whole IoT ecosystem is nothing but made of the detectors which are or sensors which are like for humidity, rainfall, temperature, and many other things. But most important thing is they should be kind of very accurately kind of done. Now, in the field of IoT for agriculture, one of the, I mean, mainstay today are agricultural drones, which could be sometimes used on the ground or sometimes they're kind of used on the in the air, and assessment of crop health and crop monitoring, and of course sometimes they're also used for planting, crop spraying, or analyzing this kind of data. Now, the 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 insights, the information about the plant health indices, which are namely, the counting or yield production or plant height, or, the various characteristics of the plants, the chlorophyll measurement, etc., nitrogen content, weed. Sometimes even the mapping of the drainage, the water, and so on, the weeds that I have in the crop, etc. They're all done by using sensors which are mounted on the drones, which they do imaging or which they do mapping. Sometimes they do surveying of the entire agricultural land. And typically when you talk about drones like this, you mount heat sensors, which are thermal sensors, visual sensors, which I told you. Sometimes they're also for soil reflectance measurement. I told you infrared, mid-infrared, and multi-infrared. So multispectral sensors are mounted beneath the drones to kind of require what are the changes that I should. Suppose I find that the same soil that I have mapped 1 week back, 10 days back. Now today again I'm mapping, I see the reflectance has gone quite bad, showing me that the moisture level in my field has gone bad. That means it is the time for me to do, let us say irrigation. That means I have to water this, and so on and so forth. So drones have become an auxiliary technology which has really helped agricultural field. Now, one application of drones I just would like to kind of little bit go in detail. What is called this plant phenotyping. This is the most important concept today to monitor the health of a field in general. How does it work? Of course, I have the plant genomics, whatever the plant, plant like us also is made of genes, and you have to kind of understand the plant genomics and the environment that we have around all the environment ecosystem. How does it affect a particular crop that we are going to have? There is obviously an interaction between genomics of the plant with the environmental conditions, and both indirectly then give you what is called the phenotyping, right? It is actually a quite good emerging field, which is basically combining genomics of the plant with the so-called ecophysiology or agronomy. Agronomy is agriculture economy. So the functional plant body, that is what we call phenotype, is formed during the plant growth, and how you develop the dynamic interaction between the environment here and the genomics here. So these interactions obviously determine how the plant is performing, how the productivity is measured, how much biomass is accumulated, which means suppose here you see it is like a maize, how big the seeds are, how big the that crop itself, or the vegetable sizes, and so on and so forth. It becomes very important for me to monitor how this interaction is working out to that level, right? So if I want to do a very quantitative analysis of actual plant traits, which means what is the grain weight, what is the pathogens resistance, whether it has got affected by some pests and so on, or it's very important. So that's why I need to kind of monitor these parameters from the top, and then I take a kind of action to that. So there are, as I mentioned, plant phenotypes is the major field in which sometimes I measure the structural aspects of the plant. Sometimes I measure physiological structures of the plant. Sometimes temporal. Temporal means it's a time dependent. Okay, this is sometimes the structure is a space dependent. So I will measure what is the height, and width of the plant, and sometimes what is the volume of the biomass like seeds, etc. What is the length of these seeds, leaves, or stem height, and whatever. and the leaves curvature, the shapes, what is the temperature, what is the water content that I see in the plant, and so on, and what is the carbohydrate content of the stem, right? And the leaf elongation, the plant growth, you name varieties and varieties of germination time, emergence time of reproductive, or all these parameters for this particular plant which is maize. You can see how many parameters, from including what you have below the ground, also including roots, including certain derived parameter. These are the primary ones, these are the derived ones. So for every plant, you actually have to do integrated measurements. One of the things that, the way, as I mentioned to you, if you want to look at how healthy a particular plant in terms of able to kind of plant or crop is growing on track and going, means it is as is expected, responding to all the local weather conditions. Okay, and you will therefore require cheaper, very low cost sensors and very, very low, powerful AI, or sometimes people use ML algorithms, and which are able to go to the goal. Now, by applying just these principles, only looking at the plant phenotyping, they're able to kind of increase the yield in a phenomenal way every year after year, to kind of see, just like what we talk about Moore's law in terms of electronics, but similar things are also being done in the agriculture. I want to share here with you one such a very, very, very nice development that you will actually see here is, just a minute. Can you also hear a sound here? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Are you also hearing audio from this film?
No, audio is not hearing.
Okay, great. Okay. So imagine what I'm trying to show. I'm actually trying to show here, like what is the kind of, how, if I want to kind of do such kind of phenotyping, means monitoring the leaves here, can I, for example, instead of using drones, can I actually use, let us say like bees, bumble bees, and can I mount a very, very tiny sensors, which are actually, can I mount on the back of these, on the back side? You can see this particular bee on the back. There is this little sensor that is mounted on it. Can I use the bees as a kind of free, movement device instead of using a drone? If I have to use a drone, of course, then I have to worry about its battery, its movement, etc. Since the bumblebees go all around the field, can I kind of use those things for free, and only to kind of mount these sensors, which already obviously have the entire signal processing and power and everything and communication on their back? Can I kind of use them? Now, it's a very interesting field, because people are able to kind of, here is the reference, people are able to kind of make these sensors using some very nice techniques, and able to kind of transfer data at reasonably good speed. And they were able to kind of mount about, about 100 milligrams of load on the back of a bee. And what kind of load that it is, you'll actually find that they did a quite interesting aspects. Like if I have a crop here, and if there are bees that are flowing around, I of course will have certain stations through which I'll be able to collect the data, which is sitting on the back. And then people built a very, very nice tiny devices using the technologies, which are very interesting. For example, here you talk about what is called a backscatter transmission. So the data that you have is, you don't have a transmitter sitting on your chip, but actually use the frequencies that are prevailing, maybe a radio signal, maybe a TV signal, and so on. And can you kind of reflect off your data using those signals off, and then your device on the receiver can pick it up, and then you can locate the device, because they are on the backs of these bees, and you can also find out the location. You can also find out the actual data that these bees are measuring for you, and so on and so forth. It's interesting. What I really wanted to show you is people are becoming very creative in terms of sensor development, and also using them networking, and more importantly, able to collect data in the big fields and so on. And agriculture, another big field is, of course, livestock. you would like if places where there's large number of cattle, cows and buffaloes, etc. You need to, in big fields, you should be able to kind of harvest the milk. You should be able to control the feeding, breeding, and many times you also have to monitor their behavior, because this becomes very important part sometimes. So again, the wireless IoT applications collect data regarding their location of these animals, their well-being, their health, and like there are now, you will see devices which are mounted on the ear lobes or elsewhere to measure the heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and just like how a human being is kind of monitored. And what is even more important is they can kind of use to monitor the sick animals, so that an appropriate action can be taken, especially if the animal developed certain disease or certain infectious disease. They can quickly kind of separate out that particular thing from the herd, so that it doesn't spread the disease to others. Now there are even sensors which are actually battery powered sensors, which are able to kind of be mounted on the pregnant animals, and when the animal is actually about to give birth to a calf, one is able to kind of monitor this remotely. In a big ranches where there are hundreds and maybe thousands of the cows are actually going, they're able to kind of monitor the health. They're able to monitor all the behavior. They're able to monitor diseases. They're able to kind of monitor even some events like what I told you, pregnancy and birth, etc. It's a very amazing kind of field that you can kind of go. Sometimes when you talk about the so-called smart greenhouses, these are controlled environment. You already have a greenhouse under which you want to grow some very special crops, not in the open, right? Again, IoT plays a big role, because the entire system in this case, that means reading the parameters using solar powered sensors and so on, and actuating various devices. It could be a window to open, or maybe turn on certain lights inside the smart greenhouses, or maybe turn on a mister, turn on a fan, or everything can be kind of done remotely. So if you're talking about a very confined greenhouses, IoT application is even much more wider compared to the applications that you will see inside a big field. Okay, and of course, data analytics, as I said, plays a big role, because these are the ones that are going to crunch the data and very quickly and take an action on so on. And robotics in agriculture start playing again a big role, both to do weeding, anti-weeding, taking out the weeds that are in the crop, or maybe sometimes go and do delicate process of picking up fruits, and maybe can perform any job that you give. Here you can see that this is a robot, AgriBot, but inside a kind of a greenhouse, and you can program it to do varieties of things. Okay. Now, when I have all this data, Chris Praveen, how much time do you have? About half an hour? Dr. Praveen?
Hi, yes, sir.
About half an hour I have, or less? Half an hour. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll finish quickly. Now, when you have sensors which are located in the field, at the end, as we said, everything comes to an electrical signal. It becomes very important how well I'll be able to deal these very small signals that the sensors are giving, and I want to build very reliable systems. And ultimately, when I'm a signal processing person, the most important thing is the electronic processing of those tiny signals to extract what is the actual physical parameter that I'm trying to measure. That becomes very important, and that is what is sensor signal processing. Of course, it is important not only measure the signal with very high accuracy. Here you can see that the accuracy is pretty good, because this is what the center of this this circle. I want to measure the parameter, and I was able to measure close to that, but unfortunately it is not with good precision, because my numbers are going all around. This is very good precision, but this far from the point where I want to measure. So this is very high precision, low accuracy. This is high accuracy, low precision, but I should be able to build my instrumentation to measure any signal that is coming from sensor with high accuracy as well as high precision. Sometimes it also depends on, some of the sensors age with the time. Some of the sensors may be linear in its output. Some of them may not be linear in output. Some of the sensors may not be able to reproduce the same signal again and again. So I have to, in the field, I should be able to calibrate the sensors behavior very well. Okay, many times we start using very simple amplifiers in the beginning of a signal processing circuit, because the sensor circuits are sensor signals are very tiny. So if there is a current that is coming out, we actually use this kind of circuits to convert into a voltage. This is nothing but an ordinary current to voltage amplifier. Sometimes you use regular voltage amplifiers, very tiny voltage amplifiers, takes voltage and gives the voltage output. Sometimes we take so-called charge, which is produced by the sensor, and convert them into output using an integrator kind of circuitry. Okay, but you will see in all these three circuits, I'm actually trying to show an op-amp across which you have connected certain device, and that you do it because op-amp provides a very high open loop gain, and that becomes very useful to be able to get all the current from the circuit here, because this will become RF by A. RF by A will be very small resistance, but at the same time it will give you RF for conversion. Similarly here, CF into A will be the total capacitance that I'm going to see. So therefore it will give a very nice interface to any sensors that I use. Op-amp, good qualities of an op-amp is used here. Sometimes we also use for instrumentation amplifier, because if the signals are very tiny, the signal to noise could be pretty bad. So instead of taking one signal, I will take a differential signal and then take a difference between them, and the common mode automatically gets rejected. Sometimes the signal that comes, I want to convert into a TTL signal or logic signal or a CMOS signal. So we basically use what is called a comparator. I feed my analog signal and then set up a threshold here. Depending on whether the signal is above or below, I'll get the output as 0 or 1. We all know about these things. But why I showed those few slides before is to show you that we actually don't use those, op-amp based or transistor based circuits anymore. As you remember, we need to make very tiny sensors coupled with electronics. So therefore you have to design such kind of many channels amplifier or front end or analog or whatever, but you should go and build what is called application specific integrated circuits, because I'll be able to combine a lot of signals together and able to maintain low power consumption by developing my own chips. Like what you see after you design them, you send the entire design to a factory, a foundry, they will actually make for you application specific integrated circuits, and that is what you will use to do signal processing. Of course, you use ADCs, but again, you don't use the ADCs normally. What are used in very classical type of successive approximation, etc., because the processing speed is a big concern. And for signal processing, we usually use what is called a flash ADC. You will have such components tied together, and you give the input together to all of them. The output comes instantly here, and then I'll be able to kind of get the data very fast. So this is, if you want to build data conversion very fast, you use parallel ADC or flash ADCs, right? And when you have all this in a kind of a field, this is my field where I have many sensors, and different signals are going to come to me. And then depending on whether I need processing on there, or some of these smart sensors do not require any processing, I kind of do a multiplexer, get an A to D, and get all at my back end. Sometimes I have to actuate certain actuators based on the data that I received, and that's what I kind of run through. Now, many times, in the small setup like a colleges or industry, we use smart sensors which already take care of temperature or pressure or relative humidity and so on and so forth. They already have inside, let us say, microcontroller, ADCs, and the EPROMs, memories, maybe interface like SPI, etc. All you need to kind of do is go to market and buy whatever all your node MCUs and microcontrollers. Just connect those two wires and your system is ready. And so coupling, interfacing smart sensors, which all basically means everything is kind of embedded already in that little device, become very easy to kind of read it. But so therefore, all our students has very cheap, very few hundred rupees worth things. You go to market and buy these devices, and it is becoming very nice these days to be able to kind of interface not only wired devices like Raspberry or Arduino and so on and so forth, but now you have Node MCU sitting there. You can actually build a wireless system with varieties of sensors very effortlessly, because these devices are already meant for connecting up to real world, and your sensors are already coming so-called smart sensors. That's not all alone, because so many of these communication standards, the smart sensors, the data acquisition cards, all have been now employed quite well, because whether it is a serial interface, SPI interface, I2C, they all have been developed quite well for the digital circuits, communication, digital communication systems, computer systems, and so on. And people found very nicely to be able to import the technologies. But in addition, you will also see, since it is also an IEEE, known for standardization, you'll find that IEEE also came with a specific 1451, which is meant for communication standard for sensors. So now that is the kind of field, it's a multi-pronged kind of development happening in the IoT and sensors. And but why we are heading towards the kind of, don't go by that simple analog and, very discrete kind of logic. We go into programmable logic, because programmability, like what you must have heard about field programmable gate arrays, which are nothing but devices where the entire logic blocks are available to you when you buy from a market, and your entire system of your signal processing and sensor network or algorithms you develop yourself, and then place that logic inside these logic blocks, connect the logic blocks through the routing matrices, and then bring everything out onto pins. Now this has become a real game where the developments are suddenly shooting up. One side you have application specific integrated ICs, and other side you have let us say the digital circuits like field programmable gate arrays. These have revolutionized the signal processing circuits of sensors and IoT systems. All these FPGAs inside, you have what is called lookup tables. And if I have certain input parameters that I want to make a logic circuit like this, I actually build the truth table the way I build that, and I kind of take the truth table and place it inside the logic lookup table inside, and depending on what are my input statuses, I'm actually going to say this is my output that I'm seeing. If I don't like this particular logic equation, no problem. I kind of change. I can kind of generate a new truth table, and I just simply download that particular code into my FPGA, and FPGA becomes a new logic device. FPGAs have seen huge development for the last 15 years, starting from just having only some 60-70 flip-flops in 1985. Now you have millions and millions of logic blocks, and they have huge communication links running at 32 gigabits per second. Hundreds of such ports are available in one chip, so I can actually do a fast data transfer to the backend, which we talked about some time back. Okay, now you do of course have the so-called multi-processing system on chip. On one chip, I have my very high performance MCUs. I have the interfaces. I have the DMAs and other infrastructure. I have memory devices. I have management. Everything is placed on a single chip called system on chip, and that has revolutionized the entire field of signal processing. I'm able to now put, if I can design a big system, I can squeeze that entire system into one FPGA block inside, and which would have occupied for me, if I make a printed circuit board, maybe about 0.5 meter by 0.5 meter in size. And what is best, as I told you, that if I don't like, if I have to make changes in the logic, it just takes for me 5 minutes to kind of make the change and download the new code into the FPGAs. That has revolutionized the flexibility for data acquisition. So therefore, flexibility for the entire system. And what is important is also, because inside the FPGAs, I can also have all the microcontrollers inside whatever way I like, and I can program them the way I program a microprocessor or microcontroller and so on, and interface all these devices to the FPGAs. And what is most important is FPGAs can run much faster speeds compared to the conventional microcontrollers. So what we really do is we build all the custom circuits by ourselves, either it is digital, analog or digital, and then we kind of make boards using those devices. And when we put such kind of multiprocessor system on chip, this chip is actually sitting behind the heatsink, so you don't see, but you can really build a very, very complex for circuits for signal processing. And I can also run algorithms of AI and ML inside the FPGA itself. Okay. So what I told right now is a lot of signal processing that happens during current days is either done by field programmable gate arrays or ASICs. But whether you want to design your system on FPGA or ASIC, you have to make a call depending on what are your requirements. I'm not going to go more detail because I don't have time right now, but you really have to make a judgment. But basically, these are the two devices which are ruling the signal processing. Microelectronics itself is now going at a very rapid scale. Today we are not talking about hundreds of transistors inside a chip. We are talking of billions of transistors inside a chip. We want to increase the speed of the circuit. We want to reduce the power. We want to also reduce to make it very, very tiny devices. Remember, circuit speed, power consumption, and design area are the main attributes of an IoT system, because we need all three, but you will also find many times this requires a kind of trade-off between them. But the advancements that are happening in the microelectronics regime, all the way starting from 1960s to today, you can see it is shrinking in the process size, the node size, the feature size. Now we are actually talking about transistors at a level of just 5 to 10 nanometers level, which means I'm able to squeeze a larger and larger circuit space inside one chip. Okay, but the challenges that one has is optical lithography. How small devices I can make using the lithography technique. But the most important is the area, the power, the speed of characteristics, as I kind of mentioned to you. But ultimately, when I want to measure, how smaller and smaller devices I can make, that is completely kind of changing the scenario these days. You heard about the Moore's law. Now it is no more possible to integrate my entire billions of transistors in one planar level of an IC. But now time has come where people are actually building so-called three-dimensional ICs, which means I have transistors which are placed multiple layers and they're all connected, by one layer to another layer. People are also finding now no more you are only confined to semiconductor technology, silicon technology, but people are also building very, very high density signal processing circuits using carbon nanotubes, which is now becoming the nanotechnology has actually taken over. And people are finding using carbon nanotube transistors, they're able to build 3D much better than the 3D ICs, okay, than the silicon strip. Okay, as I mentioned to you, many times it becomes a big challenge to make a low power but high speed. Okay, now people are actually kind of designing, because if I reduce the power, if I want to increase the speed, the transistors should be switching very fast, which means they will consume more power. Now what one is saying is, if I want to say from base to emitter, if I want to make it on, one thing is to apply a larger voltage, which also I can kind of make it a smaller, voltage drop. But can I also make, for example, certain strain that I make between the base and emitter, so that the electrons zip through very fast and go to the emitter even with a lower voltage. So people are now, you can't even imagine what kind of technologies that they're bringing into the microelectronics arena to make high speed, low power devices. And this, putting the emitter to base to emitter rather under certain strain, etc. These are very unconventional technologies, but people are ready to kind of read through all these ways by which you can think of. And other, actually this slide should have come a little later, but anyway, what is also now coming in is, we talked about sensors separately, we talk about signal processing separately, and so on and so forth. But since many times the sensors and signal processing is done using the same technology, basically, namely silicon technology or VLSI technology and so on. Now people are saying that, especially for IoT applications, they're integrating the sensors, the data acquisition, the signal production, basically signal, data acquisition system, and also transmission, etc. They're able to kind of integrate together. By integrating together, you'll be able to get a lower product cost, maybe faster time to market. You'll also get improve the signal to background signal to noise ratios, and I will also probably have a lower EMI, EMC, and much better probably reliability. The power requirement also may be less. The size of the device becomes less. So technology integration, that means I make the sensors and signal processing together using the same technology is catching up quite well. And since we talked about low power, and power management here becomes a big role, an important thing. And normally, when we make circuits, we actually make circuits and put heat sinks on the circuit so that the heat is taken away, because we don't want our power supplies or transistors to become hot, right? But now what they're doing is, it's not just the integration of sensor and the silicon DAQ chips, but even the cooling system is getting integrated into the silicon substrate. So I have basically like a microfluid kind of channels like this, you see, left to right, but each of these channels have a very tiny holes or pores connecting to actual silicon material, or you can say transistors. So it's an ultimate of microelectronics, where I'm actually able to flow certain fluid through these channels. Through these channels, I'm able to connect actual transistors, which are actually switching very fast. So therefore, I'm actually cooling the transistors directly. What we are cooling through earlier through heat sinks is that heat transferred to a device, and that device is what you're cooling. But here you're actually cooling directly the junctions. So this cooling performance will be a factor of 50 times better compared to the cooling that you kind of do conventionally. So these are the kind of technologies today we have for people who work in microelectronics and sensors development. Another thing you will see, you must have seen very big chips, either it is CPUs or GPUs or FPGAs, etc. The same thing, like what I told you, people put a lot of heat sinks, you can see, and they also use flow, like sometimes water, sometimes certain liquids flowing through the circuit board, so that they take away the heat quickly. But what you today have, you remember when you see the IC comes with a complete lid. The actual circuitry is inside, and you have the lid on the top, right? And that is what through which you see the heat coming out. But today now what people want to do is take out that lid. Don't put the lid. Send the chip to the person, to the industry or to the user without that lid on the top, so that I can build a water cooling system or a fluid thermal design touching the lid, because there's no lid. So I'm actually touching the circuit itself. So I'll be able to flow the liquid or whatever, water vapor or even liquid or heat pipe directly touching the circuitry inside. So that means I'm taking away heat much faster than I would have done it if the lid is there open. It's a very, very interesting. Today, if you see the system on chips that I told you, the chip is about maybe 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch, but you will see this kind of structures which are built. In fact, the chip is behind this. Okay, and you can actually see the chip comes with what is called ball gridded array. So those like balls instead of pins, they get attached to the PCB, but on the top, I have a complete control on how to take away the heat, because they consume sometimes hundreds of watts of power, and I should pull the power the heat out, then only I'll be able to perform a very, very high speed. So these are the kind of technologies that today we have for the chip development. So with that, I would like to kind of come to my conclusion. I want to say that sensors are, of course, the most crucial components of most of the state-of-the-art electronic systems, including the IoT systems. Uh, all the modern sensors have completely revolutionized the way we practiced agriculture. We all know as you know how in our villages and towns, you know, the agriculture practices were made, how the livestock management was made, what kind of methods we have grown to see in our things. They're all, of course, very traditional, but very inefficient. IoT as a technology owes its phenomenal kind of growth to the versatile Wi-Fi enabled smart low power smart sensors, about which we have talked a little bit today, and the advances in the material science with which the sensors themselves are made, the microfabrication techniques about which I spoke a little bit towards the second half, a very low weight signal processing architectures and algorithms, which I also mentioned many times, self-organizing sensor network schemes, which we talked in the beginning. These are the ones which are fueling exponential manufacturing, application, and business space of many modern sensors. Okay, and this multidisciplinary science, engineering, as well as technology fields, science mostly for sensor development and also the lithography for making the chips, engineering and technology are the ones where we actually engineer these products, have positioned it as the stakeholders for this very rapidly growing opportunity, but also most importantly, as I shown in the beginning, also for economics, because now I think there is a lot of money in all these disciplines, including the application areas like what we today talked about, agriculture. So with that, I would like to end my talk. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir, for delivering your talk on sensors and low power instrumentation for agriculture application. Sir, before ending this session, I would like to take some of the questions from the participants.
Sure.
Yeah. I request all the participants, if you have any queries, they can raise their hands. So before getting the raise hands from the participant, I have some questions in chat that I would like to take first. Sir, there is one question from Dr. Ullas Patil, that how to select the sensor for different application.
Different applications. Okay. Are we talking about the agriculture applications or maybe in general?
There is a general question, sir.
General question. Okay. See, the point is that when you talk about an IoT specific application, or in general even a connected, even a unconnected system. So I want to measure certain parameter in the field or in the instrument or in my process, and I would like to, based on that data, I want to take certain action. So this is the typical application where the sensor kind of uses, right? So in this way, I want to, of course, understand what is the parameter that I want to measure. Obviously, that we need to know, and most important that is what is the sensitivity that I will require. What is the, sometimes we call least count. So if you say I'm using a temperature sensor, I want to understand, do I have to measure temperature from 0 to 100? Do I have to measure temperature which is very low temperatures, millikelvin kind of temperatures? Do you have to measure very high, maybe thousands of degrees of Celsius? And then like what kind of precision that I'm expecting, least count I'm expecting. So sensors come in varieties of technologies, varieties of sensitivities. Obviously, the more sensitive measurement requires a lot more, higher technology. So therefore, it is more expensive compared to this. So I need to kind of first understand what are the physical parameters that I want to monitor. Do you want to monitor temperature, pressure, humidity, or some other parameters, or do you want to measure field, crop parameters and so on? So, I mean, it is like what is part of your system requirements. You must list them, and then corresponding sensors. Obviously, everything matters as far as cost and money is concerned. So we need to always optimize the best measurements, but also look at the cost of the finished device. So it is a slightly broad question that you asked, but what are the main parameters to look at is physical parameters that I want to measure. What are the system specifications in terms of dynamic range and let us say least count and so on. And then the cost of the instrument and other reliability. And also many times it also depends on with what interface these devices come in. Okay, do they like smart sensors? They already come in with certain interface like SPI or I2C. But dumb sensors, of course, they come with just 2 leads. So you need to kind of instrument them. They also come with varieties of specifications. So you have to look at their data sheets very well in order to be able to kind of judge. Yeah. Dr. Praveen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There is one question from one of the participants.
Okay.
Would you please suggest some electromechanical sensors which can use to detect the soil nutrients?
Yeah, soil nutrients, they actually come under the broad class of electrochemical devices, which has to look up for a particular ions that are resident in the ultimately when you talk about any nutrients, they become something like a hydrocarbons in some level, and also the other elemental constitutions. So for detecting concentrations of different let us say elemental or compounds, you need to kind of use those electrochemical sensors, and there has to be a mapping of the measurements that you do. Mapping is basically, suppose I use a sensor which will detect certain element or certain compound, but that will only give me, for example, if I detect oxygen, it will only give me a value corresponding to the oxygen levels, but that is not going to give me a direct information saying that whether my soil has what kind of nutrients. Now, you want to detect, for example, many times it happens, I would like to detect whether there is enough nitrogen in my field, some potassium in my field, or some other nutrients in my field, or I should be supplementing them using certain manures and so on. So you need to use, basically this range of sensors which are required to monitor the electrochemicals are the ones which are used as a nutrient sensors inside the field, and the rest of it, of course, is basically instrumentation. Number one. Number two, sometimes, as I mentioned to you earlier, a certain amount of information regarding the nutrition in the clay, in the crop, in the field can also be observed or gleaned from imagery. Imagery means the pictures that I take. Pictures need not be visible. It can be infrared. It can be any other another wavelength. But because you use the reflectance of the soil as a parameter, as an indirect parameter of what kind of nutrients it might be there, because lack of nutrients in the field might give me a color or a reflection in a different way. So you can use real electrochemical sensors. You can also use imagery techniques in order to estimate the soil quality or soil nutrition.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Ram Dekekar to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Sir, sir, you
Hello.
talked about the ASIC design.
Yeah, please.
In that, I need to design to interface the 20 analog channels.
Okay.
20 analog channels. So, will it be possible?
Sorry, will it be possible? Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah. See, how many channels you want to read out is not something very important in that sense, because it all depends on the complexity of the circuit to some extent. For example, in one of the slides that I've shown, a very top level kind of a drawing of, let us say, typical analog front end. I have a signal coming from sensor. I have transimpedance amplifier. I have differential amplifier. I have comparator, I have multiplexer, I have driver, and so on. Now that entire thing is like one channel, what I will kind of show. Now, in principle, if I want to make an ASIC which is an 8-channel device or a 16-channel device, some of the chips that we make is actually 256-channel device, which means that it can actually process 256 signals parallelly. Now, what is the difference? The difference is I essentially have to copy the circuitry, the layout, and everything 256 times. However, sometimes depending on where my actual logic, actual circuit is sitting, either it is sitting at the center of the chip, at the corners, at the top, and so on, there will be some differences of the process level differences that can happen. So these are sometimes called corner effects. But if you exclude those kind of effects, whether you make 8-channel or single channel or 32 channels, I mean, it is essentially the same technology. Okay, of course, the chip becomes bigger, the technology, the complexity of the chip becomes different, and then manufacturing also sometimes become different. So you have to make a trade-off or a compromise saying, if I have to build 256 device, or if I have to build 464-bit channel device and make them in a circuit board, which is more easy for me. Okay, so that call as a designer you have to make. But I'm saying in principle, they're all possible.
Thank you very much, sir. So I think we don't have any question from the participants.
Okay.
So we'll stop for today's session. So I thanks Dr. Satyanarayana sir for his wonderful lecture on sensors and low power instrumentation. So sir has delivered different types of sensors, then their application in agriculture field. He also delivered how different advances are happened in material science in the field of sensors, then micro fabrication techniques and self-organizing sensor networks in the sensors. He also suggested different signal conditioning circuits for some of these sensors. And finally, he delivered about some different technology integrations along with the sensors. I hope that your session will help all the participants to integrate the sensors in their IoT application. So on behalf of Sri Santa Gajanan Maharaj College of Engineering, I thanks Dr. Satyanarayana sir for delivering the talk. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Praveen. And also thank you very much for all the participants. I see there are a large number of them. And I hope what I spoke was sort of useful to you in some way. I tried to kind of give a flavor of things that we do in a slightly different domain, but I know there are lots of parallels between the developments that we do both at sensor development as well as the signal processing circuits, also including VLSI. But unfortunately, I couldn't cover so much because lack of time. But I hope it was useful to you. I wish you all the best for rest of the sessions, and also I hope the FTP has been so far very fruitful for all of you. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So with the permission,
Yeah.
this session is over. Yeah.
So I log out myself?
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks.